When a 12-year-old showed up at a biker clubhouse and refused to leave, no one expected what he'd say next. 3 days of silence, one devastating loss, and a promise made by a man who could no longer keep it. This is the story of Charlie, and the brotherhood that became his second chance. The sun had just dipped below the horizon when Manny Hooks Delgado first noticed the kid. Friday nights at Devil's Ridge meant noise, bikes, music, brothers swapping stories over beer. But this kid wasn't part of any of that. He sat alone on the curb outside the chain-link gate, backpack beside him, knees pulled up to his chest. Manny figured he'd wander off eventually. Kids sometimes cut through the industrial lot on their way home from school. But an hour later, when Manny stepped outside for a smoke, the boy was still there. Same position, same blank stare fixed on the clubhouse doors. Weird, Manny muttered, flicking ash onto the pavement. By 10 o'clock, the kid hadn't moved. A few of the brothers noticed too. Diesel, the club's enforcer, suggested calling the cops. Could be a runaway, he said, or bait for something worse. But Manny's gut told him different. There was something in the way the boy sat, not fidgeting, not scared, just waiting, like he belonged there even though he clearly didn't. Saturday morning arrived with the desert heat. The kid was still outside. His face was streaked with dust, and his school uniform looked like it hadn't been changed in days. Manny watched from the garage as the boy pulled a water bottle from his bag, took one careful sip, then screwed the cap back on tight. Rationing. "All right, that's enough," Manny said, limping toward the gate. His knee, shattered in a wreck years back, still gave him hell, but he moved with the kind of authority that made people listen. He pushed the gate open. The boy looked up, eyes sharp despite the exhaustion written across his face. "You lost, kid." The boy shook his head slowly. "No, sir." "Then what are you doing here?" The kid's voice came out steady, almost too calm for someone his age. "He said you protect good people." Manny stopped. "Who said that?" "My grandpa." There was no hesitation in the answer, no fear, just certainty. Manny felt something tighten in his chest. He glanced back at the clubhouse, then crouched down, knee screaming in protest so he could meet the boy's eyes. "What's your name?" "Charlie." "Charlie what?" "Charlie Barnes." The name hit Manny like a freight train. Barnes. Harold Barnes. The old trucker who used to run convoys with the Brotherhood back when they were hauling cross-country loads for cash under the table. Harold had been solid, loyal, dependable, the kind of man you'd trust with your life. But Manny hadn't heard from him in months. "Harold's your grandpa?" Charlie nodded. "Where is he?" The boy's jaw tightened. For the first time, his composure cracked. His eyes dropped to his shoes, scuffed sneakers caked in miles of dust. "He's gone." Manny didn't need clarification. The way Charlie said it, flat, final, told him everything. Harold was dead. When? 4 days ago. Manny's mind raced. For days. That meant Charlie had been sitting here for at least 3 of them. Where was his mom? His dad? Why wasn't anyone looking for this kid? "You got anyone else? Family?" Charlie's face hardened. "No one who matters." That answer said more than the boy probably intended. Manny stood, his knee popping audibly, and looked down at Charlie with a mix of pity and respect. This kid had walked here alone and trusted leather-wearing strangers on a dead man's word. "You eat today?" Charlie hesitated. "No, sir." "Come on." Manny pushed the gate wider and gestured toward the clubhouse. Charlie grabbed his backpack and followed without a word. Inside smelled like motor oil, beer, and leather. Walls covered in road signs and decades-old club patches. A few brothers looked up from the poker table as Manny led Charlie toward the kitchen. "Who's the kid?" Diesel asked, cards still in hand. "Harold's grandson." The room went quiet. Every man there knew Harold. They'd ridden with him, drank with him, trusted him. Hearing his name tied to a dust-covered kid sitting outside their gate changed everything. Manny microwaved a plate of leftover chili, and set it in front of Charlie at the scarred wooden table. The boy ate slowly, methodically, like he was trying to make it last. No one spoke. They just watched. This polite, exhausted kid who'd walked into their world carrying a ghost's promise. After Charlie finished, Manny pulled up a chair. "You gonna tell me what happened?" Charlie set his spoon down carefully. "Grandpa had a heart attack. I was home, called 911, but..." His voice trailed off. "After the funeral, my mom's boyfriend said I couldn't stay. Said he'd call child services if I didn't leave." "Your mom didn't stop him?" Charlie's expression went cold. "She wasn't there." Manny felt anger rising in his throat, but he kept his voice steady. "So you came here. Grandpa used to show me pictures, told me stories about the Brotherhood. He said if anything ever happened, I should find you." Charlie looked up and Manny caught it, the fear he'd been hiding beneath all that composure. "He said you protect the good ones." Manny exhaled slowly. Harold hadn't just sent this kid to them. He'd trusted them with his legacy. And if there was one thing the Devil's Ridge Brotherhood understood, it was honoring a brother's final wish. "All right, Charlie," Manny said, standing. "You're staying tonight. We'll figure the rest out tomorrow." Charlie nodded, relief flickering across his face. That night, he slept on a cot in the break room, surrounded by the low hum of engines and distant laughter. He wasn't alone anymore. But while Charlie slept, Manny sat in the dim garage light with his phone, scrolling through obituaries and public records. By dawn, he'd found Harold's death notice. No arrangements listed, no next of kin, just a kid who'd walked 10 miles to keep a promise. Sunday morning arrived with the smell of burnt coffee and engine grease. Charlie woke to voices drifting through the break room door, low, serious, the kind of conversation that stopped when outsiders walked in. He sat up on the cot, rubbing sleep from his eyes, and listened. 12 years old, Manny. We can't just keep him here like a stray dog. I'm not suggesting we do, Diesel. I'm saying we handle this the right way. The right way is calling CPS. Let the system. The system? Manny's voice cut sharp. You know what the system does to kids like Charlie? Shuffles them between foster homes until they age out or run away. Harold trusted us. That means something. Charlie pulled on his shoes and stepped into the main room. 6 men sat around the poker table, but no cards were out. Diesel, a mountain of a man with a scar running down his jaw, looked up first. The conversation died instantly. "Morning, kid," Manny said, standing. "You sleep okay?" "Yes, sir." Betty emerged from the kitchen carrying a plate of scrambled eggs and toast. She was in her 60s, silver hair pulled back, face weathered but kind. She'd been the club's treasurer back when they ran legitimate trucking gigs, and though she'd retired years ago, she still kept the books balanced. "Eat," she said, setting the plate in front of Charlie. "You're too skinny." Charlie ate while the brothers talked in careful circles, building a wall he couldn't quite see through. When he finished, Manny gestured toward the garage. "Come on, let's put you to work." The garage was chrome and oil, bikes in disassembly, tools scattered like surgical instruments. Manny handed Charlie a rag and pointed at a Harley with its engine exposed. "You know how to clean parts? Grandpa taught me some." "Good. Start with those carburetors. Gentle but thorough." Charlie worked in silence, his hands moving with surprising precision. Manny watched from the corner, pretending to organize wrenches while actually studying the kid. There was something old in Charlie's eyes, a weariness that didn't belong to someone barely into middle school. By noon, Betty appeared in the doorway. "Manny, a word." They stepped outside. Through the garage window, Charlie could see them talking, Betty's arms crossed, Manny shaking his head. Finally, Manny nodded, and they both came back inside. "Charlie," Betty said, pulling up a stool, "we need to talk about what happens next." Charlie set down the carburetor. His hands were black with grease. You're sending me away." "No," Manny said firmly. "But we need to make this legal. You can't just live here without paperwork. The state will come looking eventually." Betty leaned forward. "Your grandfather and I were close once. A long time ago. If the court needs a guardian, I can file. I've got a clean record, a house, steady income from my pension. It won't be forever, but it'll keep you out of the system until we figure something better out." Charlie looked between them, his throat tight. "Why would you do that?" "Because Harold asked us to protect the good ones," Manny said. "And you're one of them." The paperwork took 3 days. A lawyer, an old friend of the club who owed them more than a few favors, expedited the emergency guardianship petition. Charlie gave his mother's name when pressed, but refused to provide her address. "She doesn't want me," he said simply. "And I don't want her." The court didn't push. With Harold's obituary as evidence and no other relatives stepping forward, Betty was granted temporary custody. Charlie moved into the small bedroom in her house. Clean sheets, a desk, walls painted pale blue. It felt too quiet after the clubhouse. But every afternoon, Betty drove him back to Devil's Ridge. Charlie swept floors, organized parts, and asked endless questions about compression ratios and fuel injectors. The brothers answered patiently, teaching him the language of engines and loyalty in equal measure. 2 weeks passed like that. Routine settled in. Charlie went back to school, 7th grade at Desert View Middle, and came home to Betty's cooking and the clubhouse's organized chaos. He smiled more, slept through the night, started to believe that maybe, just maybe, the worst was over. Then Danielle showed up. It was a Thursday afternoon. Charlie was in the garage, helping Hooks replace a clutch cable, when a rusted sedan screeched into the lot. The driver's door flew open, and a woman stumbled out, thin, jittery, her eyes too wide and movements too sharp. "Where is he?" she screamed. "Where's my son?" Charlie froze. He knew that voice, hadn't heard it in months, but knew it down to his bones. Manny stepped out of the clubhouse, Diesel right behind him. "You need to calm down." "Don't tell me to calm down. You stole my kid." "Nobody stole anyone," Manny said evenly. "Charlie came here on his own. Because you brainwashed him. My father brainwashed him." Danielle's words slurred together. She was high, painfully, obviously high. "He's my son. Mine. You can't just take him." Charlie stepped into view. Danielle's eyes locked onto him, and for a second, something like recognition flickered across her face. Then it twisted into anger. "Get in the car, Charlie. Now." "No." The word came out quiet but absolute. Danielle staggered forward, and Diesel moved to block her path. Behind her, in the driver's seat, a man sat watching. Early 30s, dead eyes, engine still running. "Robson, I'm your mother," Danielle shouted. "You don't get to say no." "You didn't want me when Grandpa died," Charlie said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "You let him threaten me. You didn't even come to the funeral." "I was grieving." "You were high." The words hit like a slap. Danielle's face crumpled, then hardened. "I need money. If you're staying here, they owe me. Child support or whatever." And there it was. Not custody, not love, just money. Manny stepped forward, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "You need to leave. Now." Danielle's eyes locked on Charlie, and whatever she saw made her flinch. She turned without another word, climbed back into the car, and Robson peeled out, leaving tire marks and silence. Charlie stood in the driveway long after the dust settled. He didn't cry, didn't scream. He just walked back into the garage, picked up his wrench, and went back to work. But that night, alone in Betty's guest room, he finally let himself break. 3 years passed. Charlie turned 15, surrounded by brothers who'd become family. The awkward 12-year-old had grown taller, broader, grease permanently under his fingernails and loyalty in his bones. They called him Spanner now. The nickname stuck after he rebuilt a carburetor in half the time it took diesel, explaining the mechanics with the patience of someone who genuinely loved the work. He managed parts inventory, organized charity runs, and rode shotgun in the support van when the Brotherhood did their annual toy drive for the Children's Hospital. His room at Betty's house had transformed too. Club patches covered one wall, gifts from brothers who'd seen him grow up, photos of rides, group shots at barbecues, a framed picture of Harold in his army uniform that Manny had found in storage. Charlie had built himself a life here, brick by brick, mile by mile. He didn't talk about Danielle. Not after that Thursday afternoon 3 years back. Her name became a ghost no one spoke aloud. Betty tried once gently, and Charlie had simply said, "She made her choice." The conversation ended there. But ghosts have a way of returning. It was late April when Manny found him on the clubhouse roof. Stars scattered across the desert night overhead. Charlie sat with his back against the old air conditioning unit, something clutched in his hand. "You okay up here?" Manny called, pulling himself up the ladder with a grunt. "Yeah, just thinking." Manny settled beside him, his bad knee complaining. "About?" Charlie opened his hand. An envelope, crumpled from being held too tight, addressed in handwriting that wavered between cursive and print. No return address, just a postmark from Riverside, 60 miles east. "It came yesterday," Charlie said. "Took me this long to open it." "From her." Charlie nodded. Manny didn't ask to read it. He just waited, the way he'd learned to wait with Charlie, giving space for words to come when they were ready. "She's in a women's shelter. Says she left Robson 8 months ago. Checked herself into rehab. Been clean for 6 months." Charlie's voice stayed flat, carefully emotionless. "She wrote that she knows she doesn't deserve to be forgiven. That she's not asking to be my mom again. Just, if I ever wanted to talk, she'd be there." "What do you want to do?" "I don't know." Charlie looked at the letter like it might bite him. "Part of me wants to throw this away and forget she exists. She walked away when I needed her. She chose drugs and that bastard over me. Why should I care that she's finally getting her act together? You shouldn't. Not if you don't want to. But," Manny chose his words carefully, "but Harold raised you to be better than your worst moments. And sometimes being better means giving people a chance they don't deserve. Not for them, but for yourself. So you don't carry that anger forever." Charlie was quiet for a long time. What if she relapses? What if this is just another lie? Then you walk away. But you'll walk away knowing you tried. That's the difference between you and her, Charlie. You don't give up on people, even when they've given up on themselves. Sunday, Charlie asked Manny for a ride to Riverside. Manny didn't press, just nodded. They rode in silence, the pickup's rumble filling the gaps. At Riverside's edge, Charlie asked to be dropped a block away. "I need to do this part alone," he said. Manny hesitated, then handed him his phone. "Call me when you're done." Charlie walked the last block, sun burning overhead. The shelter, institutional beige with barred windows, loomed ahead. He stood at the gate for almost 20 minutes before forcing himself forward. Danielle was waiting on a bench outside. She looked different. Older, thinner, but with clear eyes and clean hair. She wore donated clothes, jeans that didn't quite fit, a faded blue sweater. When she saw Charlie, she stood slowly, like sudden movements might scare him off. "Hi," she said. "Hi." They stood there, an ocean of silence between them. Finally, Danielle gestured to the bench. "Want to sit?" They sat. Not close, but not distant either. Somewhere in the uncomfortable middle. "Thank you for coming," Danielle said. "I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't. I understand." She twisted her hands together. "Charlie, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to know that I remember. I remember holding you when you were born. I remember loving you before I loved the pills more. And I hate myself for what I did. Charlie stared at the cracked pavement. Why now? Why get clean now? Because I woke up in a hospital after Robson put me there, and I realized I had nothing left. No father, no son, no future, and I could either die like that or try to become someone Dad would have been proud of. Even if it's too late. It is too late, Charlie said quietly. For us, I mean, you're not my mom anymore. Betty is more of a mom than you ever were. Danielle flinched but nodded. I know, but… Charlie swallowed hard. Grandpa used to say everyone deserves a chance to rebuild. So if you're serious about this, really serious, then maybe we can be something. Not mother and son, but something. Danielle's eyes filled with tears. I'd like that. They talked for an hour, carefully, about neutral things, her therapy sessions, his work at the garage, the weather. No promises. No apologies that couldn't be backed up with action. Just two people trying to find common ground in the wreckage. Manny drove them back as the sun set, painting the desert gold and crimson. He pulled into the clubhouse lot and found Manny waiting on the steps. How'd it go? Charlie shut off the engine and sat for a moment. I don't know yet, but I went. That's something, right? Manny smiled. Yeah, kid. That's everything. Charlie walked inside, the letter still folded in his pocket. A fragile bridge between who he'd been and who he might become. The meetings continued through spring into summer. Every other Sunday, someone drove Charlie to Riverside. He and Danielle met at the shelter or at a small diner halfway between, splitting a plate of fries and talking about everything except the years they'd lost. Danielle was fragile, flinching at loud sounds, crying at commercials, talking about her sponsor with exhausted relief. Recovery wasn't a straight line. It was a daily battle she fought with trembling hands and sheer stubbornness. Charlie didn't tell her he was proud of her. Not yet, but he showed up, and that counted for something. The Brotherhood never questioned his absences. They understood, and they were always there when he returned. They'd given him the space to figure out who he wanted to be, even if that person included room for someone who'd once abandoned him. By September, Danielle had moved into a transitional housing program. She got a job at a grocery store, stocking shelves overnight. The work was hard and the pay was terrible, but she showed up every shift. Sent Charlie photos of her employee ID badge like it was a diploma. 6 months at the same job, she texted. That's a record for me. Charlie stared at the message for a long time before replying, proud of you. Weeks later, she asked if she could meet Betty. Charlie's stomach twisted at the request, but he agreed. They met at a park neutral ground. Betty brought homemade cookies. Danielle brought apologies that came out stuttered and raw. I know I don't deserve to even speak to you, Danielle said, hands shaking around her coffee cup. You raised my son when I couldn't, when I wouldn't. I'll never be able to repay that. Betty studied her for a long moment. You're right, you can't repay it, but you can keep showing up. For him, that's all any of us can do. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was a door left open. When November came around, the Brotherhood threw Charlie a birthday party. Music, grilled food, and stories about Harold that made him laugh and ache. Manny presented him with a leather cut, club patches stitched across the back, his road name embroidered above his heart. Spanner. You earned this, Manny said, gripping his shoulder. Not because you're Harold's grandson, because you're Charlie, and you're one of us. Charlie pulled on the leather, feeling its weight settle across his shoulders like armor and absolution combined. The brothers cheered. Betty cried, and in the back of the crowd, barely visible in the evening shadows, Danielle stood watching. Charlie hadn't invited her, but she'd found out, probably from Betty, and made the hour-long trip. She wore her grocery store uniform, fresh from a shift, and clutched a small wrapped package. Their eyes met across the crowd. Charlie hesitated, then walked over. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi." She held out the package. "I know it's not much, but I wanted to give you something." Charlie unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a pocket watch, old, brass, with initials engraved on the back. H. B. Harold Barnes. "It was Dad's," Danielle explained, her voice thick. "From his army days. I found it when I was cleaning out the house years ago. Kept it even when I sold everything else. I think he'd want you to have it." Charlie's throat tightened. He opened the watch. Still ticking. Still keeping time like Harold had never stopped. "Thank you," he managed. Danielle nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there. For all of it. I'm sorry you had to be the strong one." "I had help," Charlie said, gesturing to the Brotherhood behind him. "They taught me that family isn't just blood. It's the people who show up, who stay. Like you've been showing up for me," Danielle said quietly. "Even though I didn't deserve it." Charlie looked at the watch, then at his mother. The woman who'd failed him was trying, impossibly hard, to rebuild something from the ashes. "Maybe that's the point," Charlie said. "We don't do the right thing because people deserve it. We do it because we're better than our worst moments. Someone taught me that." Manny appeared beside them, extending a hand to Danielle. "Want to join us? There's plenty of food." Danielle looked to Charlie, uncertain. He nodded. They walked together to the party. She stayed for an hour, quiet but present. When she left, Charlie walked her to the street. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for letting me." She hugged him carefully, afraid he might disappear. "I love you, Charlie. I know I lost the right to say it, but it's still true." Charlie watched her disappear into the night, the watch heavy in his pocket. He hadn't said he loved her back. Maybe he never would. But he'd given her something more valuable. A chance. When he returned to the clubhouse, Manny was waiting. "You all right?" "Yeah." Charlie looked at the brothers gathered in the light, then back at the darkness where Danielle had vanished. "Yeah, I think I am." Later, as the party wound down, Charlie stood with Manny under the desert stars. "Grandpa's promise," he said. "You kept it. You protected me." "We all did," Manny replied. "But you did something harder. You learned that strength isn't just about protecting yourself. It's about knowing when to let someone back in." Charlie smiled. "Blood doesn't make you family." "No," Manny agreed. "Loyalty does. But sometimes forgiveness does too." Harold's watch kept ticking in Charlie's pocket, a reminder that good men leave legacies that outlive them. Charlie had found his family in the Brotherhood. But through their loyalty, he'd found something even rarer: the courage to rebuild what was broken. That was Harold's real promise: the strength to choose healing over hate, the kind that turns boys into men worth knowing. This story helps us understand that real strength isn't just about protecting yourself. It's about finding the courage to let someone back in. What would you have done in his place? Could you forgive? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe to embrace the journey for more stories that remind us what it means to be human. See you in our next video.